Hey guys, it's Ryan and welcome back to the Syntax Bite. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can integrate React into an existing PHP application using Vite to kind of set up a modular JavaScript environment and then render those React components on your PHP pages. Basically what we're going to do is if you go over here to the React documentation and you search for add React to an existing project, it will suggest that you could do an entire subroute of your application. We're not going to do that. Instead, we are going to use React as part of our existing pages or pages that you want to create partially in PHP and then add a React component somewhere on the page. It doesn't have to be existing, of course. But we're going to follow the steps here to set up a modular JavaScript environment, assuming you don't already have one of those. And then render React components somewhere on the page. Now, if you go over here, it will recommend that you set this up with something called Vite. And if you go to Vite, you'll notice that there is a page on backend integration. We're going to refer back to this page throughout. There are a number of backend integrations already available. For PHP, I've selected one here that I found worked for me called MindPlay PHP Vite. It looks like this is a fairly up-to-date piece of software that hopefully will be supported into the future. Honestly, these integrations are relatively simple. Basically, what they do is read your manifest JSON and create kind of the script tags for you that you can include in your PHP files. So they're not incredibly complex from what I understand. This is something that you could implement yourself if you were motivated to and didn't want to rely on a library. But it's probably not necessary to reinvent the wheel here. So we're going to be using this. We're going to set this up in PHP. They also have a example application, which I found a little hard to understand how it works. So we're going to walk you through how to get this set up today. But we will just kind of refer to this example of how to configure everything, maybe throughout this video a little bit. So that's why I've pulled up all this documentation here. This is something that I recently had to do when I was making a simple application in PHP and wanted to add some React and found it was very confusing to navigate this entire ecosystem and get everything created from start to finish. In the end, it's not really that difficult, but there were a number of pitfalls and traps along the way. And so that's why I wanted to make this video. So hopefully you can kind of get this set up in, maybe about 20 minutes or half hour or so, whereas it took me quite a bit longer than that to really get everything set up and working correctly. So to start off here, I have a simple PHP application. It's one page. It says welcome. It's September 30th. That is all that is in my index.php here. And the only thing I'm using PHP for is that date. Of course, you will probably have a PHP application that does numerous things for you, including potentially having a login system and database connections. And that's probably why you want to use PHP and add some React components on top of that for some interactivity. But for this example, we just have PHP kind of giving us the date here, just as a simple example of how this might work. So right now I have a one-page application. You might have something more complicated, and that's fine. But for this example, we just have the index file here, and I'm using XAMPP on my computer to serve this file. So I have a local development environment set up with XAMPP. I have Apache running, and that's what's serving this file. And so that's all well and good. I can go over to localhost PHP React Vite setup, which is the folder I put this under, and we see our index here. Loads and tells us the date. Super simple, puts it in the middle of the screen, but aside from that, there's no styling. So that's what we're working with. And so we want to add React somewhere on this page. We want to add a React component somewhere on this page. And that's why we're going to set this up right now. So how do we get started? Well, the first thing that we actually need to do is kind of create the Node.js project that we're going to use with Vite. And so what we could do here is I have this Linux terminal. I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux. I will talk a little bit about the specific changes you might need to make if you are also using Windows Subsystem for Linux for your node development, but you're serving your PHP via XAMPP on your Windows machine. There are a couple of little caveats related to that that I'll walk you through. If you don't have this set up, you don't need to worry about those things. But to get started here, I'm going to go to PHP React Vite setup. And the first thing we need to do is we actually need to create this front-end project. So I'm going to do an npm create Vite at latest. And this is going to allow us to create a project. I'm going to call it front end. Of course, technically, our PHP files are kind of front end too, but that's fine. You can choose what framework you want to work with. You could follow a similar process if you're using a different framework. I'm using React, so we're going to select that. You can select whether you want TypeScript or not. I am honestly just going to do JavaScript. I think that's just a little bit easier. We won't use this roll down Vite thing. We will install with npm and start now. All right, so you'll notice that when we do this, it actually starts the server, localhost 5173. And if we go to localhost 5173, it takes a second to load here, but you'll notice that we have this React kind of template application. It has a counter, very typical kind of hello world type thing for React. That and the to-do list are probably the two basic JavaScript framework kind of quote unquote hello worlds. But this is completely disconnected from our PHP application that we had earlier. All we have done here really is just created a new application. So that doesn't really help us too much, but that's kind of the first step there is to get this going. But that's not super helpful. So let's go ahead and exit that. We can clear the terminal. The next thing that we have to do is we have to actually install this PHP Vite integration library. So we can start by doing that. So you will need to have Composer installed. Composer is a package manager for PHP. If you don't have Composer installed, you can go ahead and install it. I've already got Composer installed, so all I have to do at this point is go back into my root, which it actually is here. Sorry, we weren't in the front-end directory. I thought we were in the front-end directory. But inside my directory where I have my base PHP project, I want to do a composer require mindplay /php Vite. And that is going to add that to my project. Okay, so we've got that, and you'll notice that if I go back to VS Code here, we've had a few things created. So number one, we have the front end, and this is where our JavaScript kind of project sits. We have vendor, which is where Composer has installed our packages too. We have the Composer JSON and Composer lock files for our PHP project. So you can think of these as being very similar to the package JSON and package lock JSON files in our JavaScript project. And then we still have our index.php files. So that's good. So the next thing that we kind of need to do is we need to configure our project here so that it actually is kind of set up so that we can use it with PHP. So you'll notice here that we do have an index.html. It has a root. It includes this main file. And that's pretty much it. So one thing we want to do is I'm going to use the existing component that they have built out here. And I'm actually just going to create a root in my index.php, which this is going to latch onto. So I'm going to add that at the bottom of my PHP file there. And I want React to essentially latch on to that root and inject its component right there within my page. Now, because we're using PHP as our index, we don't actually need this index.html file. Our PHP file will provide a root ID. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete this file because we don't need it. The next thing that I'm going to do is go into my vite config.js, and this is a very important file most of the configuration that we actually end up doing is going to be within this file. And something that we need to do is we need to go to build. We're going to create a new set of build options here. We need to do manifest is true. And what that is going to do is basically it's going to produce a JSON file when we actually build and bundle up all this JavaScript that's going to be able to be read by this PHP library to understand what the actual names of these assets are and create the appropriate JavaScript tags for us. So that's very important. The other thing that we need to do is we need to set up some entry points for this Vite. So before it would have used the index.html as an entry point, which included the main JavaScript, and from there it kind of would have gone through all of the includes and included every file as necessary. We've now deleted that file, so we need to have a new entry point, which I'm going to use as path.resolve. Oops, not path2d. Not path2d. VS Code's not super happy about the idea of using path. Maybe it will be more happy if we import it first. So I'm going to import star as path from path, and then do a path.resolve. And we're going to, inside source here, we have this main.jsx, which is going to be my new entry point. You can see this is where React actually latches itself on to the element called root. And it pulls in the things it needs from there. So that is going to be my new entry point. So I'm going to do source and main.jsx is going to be my new entry point for the application. So with that completed, we should have everything we need to kind of build the files. The next thing that we need to do is actually add those tags into PHP. Maybe just super quickly here, I'll go into the front end, and if we do an npx vite build, it should build a bunch of files for us. So cool. So it's built this manifest.json, and it's also put those JS, CSS, and a CVG file there. One other thing that we actually want to do though is add in base, and this is going to tell it where, kind of what the base URL is for this application. So when it's linking to images and things of that nature, you'll see inside of app here, we have a couple of images, and they're just linked as like /vite.svg and assets react svg. It needs to know like what is the base for this assets folder. Otherwise, right now it'll just link as like assets react svg, but it won't actually be able to find it because they'll be hidden in this distribution folder. And so if we don't tell it that, it won't be able to find it. We're actually going to add in PHP React Vite setup front end dist. And the reason we're going to add this is because after our localhost URL, this is like the pathway that it actually needs to take to find those files. So we want to make sure that it's kind of fixing up those paths appropriately, so that everything is, set up in the way that it should be. And so if we go back now, this probably isn't really going to do anything, but well, it won't look like it did anything, but it will fix up those paths for us. So when we go ahead and integrate this, it should be all ready to go. The next thing that we need to do is go over to our index.php. And the first thing that we need to do is at the top here, I need to include the auto load. And this is going to allow us to basically use any composer packages that we have. Of course, we just have the one package, but you're free to install any other composer packages that you want to use with your PHP. So we're going to go ahead and require the vendor autoload.php. That's fairly important to make sure that the library actually gets included. At this point, I'm also going to define something called a debug, which we'll use in a bit. I'm going to set that to false for now. So we're going to start with working with kind of the production setup here, which is where we're going to build the files using Vite build, and then we're going to include them. After that, we can set up the hot reloading and all of that stuff, but it's a little bit more complex, so we can make sure that we actually get this this setup working where it's, generating the files and then pulling them in. And then after that, we could set up the hot reloading, which just has a few more steps. We could go ahead and use the appropriate namespace there, and then we will do a manifest object here, which is going to allow us to generate the appropriate tags. So we do new manifest. Manifest path is going to be directory name of directory, and then we do dot PHP React Vite setup. This is not quite right what the AI is suggesting, but we'll go ahead and take it, and then we do need to do /.vite and then /manifest.json. So you can see it generated that manifest.json there. We need to point that out so PHP can find that file, and that's how it's going to know what kind of script tags and whatnot to include, is it's going to look at that. We'll also say that the base path is what we had from this here. And we'll also say that dev is equal to debug, which is going to be false for the moment. From that, we can generate tags. So tags is equal to Vite create tags. And we need to provide the entry point that we had. So that is source main.jsx. So you want to make sure that whatever page that you're using, that you provide the entry point, and you can provide multiple entry points. If you had like multiple components that are not imported by each other, so they're each kind of like unique. In this case, we just have the one, but you want to provide all the entry points that you're going to need, all the kind of starting files that import the other files that are going to be used by this page. So in this case, we have this one. The next thing that we need to do is actually add those tags into our page. So we'll do tags preload here, and we do tags CSS. The AI is correct about that one. And the final one that we do at the bottom of the body here is tags.js to get our JavaScript all set up there. All right, so with that being done, we should actually be able to reload our page and see something. However, there is a error that occurred there. We just need a slash at the start of our path there for the manifest file. So let's go ahead and reload. And you can see here that actually this has kind of pulled in this React component. So we still have our text there, but we have this counter that was before completely separate, and now we've like integrated that into our PHP application. So we now have our front end that we're creating with React, or just, our React project is now fully integrated with our PHP. This looks kind of stupid based on the way that I've styled things here. One thing I can do is there is some CSS that it pulls in where it does this display flex. We could just do flex direction as column, and that should display things on top of each other instead of beside each other. Now, because we don't have the hot reloading or anything set up, we need to rebuild the Vite project in order for that change to actually show up. Once we do that, we should be able to just reload. And that looks a lot better. Okay, so cool. So we have PHP, it's telling us the date, it's producing this welcome, it's whatever. And then we have our React component, which has just kind of gone and replaced where I had the root here in my document. So this is pretty good. We're kind of most of the way there now. The only thing is that every time I make a change, I have to rebuild, which is pretty annoying for development. I couldn't figure out when I was working on my project how to get the hot reloading working, so I just dealt with this for a very long time. But I'd recommend continuing to stick around for the remainder of this video, and I can show you how you can actually get a proper development environment set up working so that you can have a great development experience and not run into issues. So basically, how do we get the hot reloading working? Well, right now we have everything that is loading directly off of our Apache server. But you'll remember that when we started the Vite project before, and the same thing would happen if we just do npx Vite instead of npx Vite build right now, it actually started up its own server. What we actually want to do here is use that server that Vite provides to serve the assets, the JavaScript, the CSS that is part of our project that is being kind of bundled by Vite. We want to use that development server to serve those, and we want to use Apache to serve everything else, all of our PHP files. So how do we do this? We can basically set up so that server will act as a proxy that kind of redirects to Apache for anything that it's not supposed to serve, and then serves anything directly that it is supposed to serve. And that's how it is kind of set up in this one right here. So we can lean on this config here as kind of a guide for how to set this up. And then there is one other thing we need to do in terms of, you'll come over to the backend integration here and you'll notice that we also need to add this script. This PHP Vite library, it looks like the person who made this was using Preact, so they don't need this kind of script for Preact. But if you're using the plugin React, which is the default React integration for Vite, then you actually do need to include this script. So I'm going to show you how to go ahead and do that. So the first thing that we're going to do though is let's set up everything as the proxy as necessary. So we can go over to our Vite config, and then we can actually just kind of copy this from here. Just copy the server configuration from the example application, and then we're going to make a couple of quick changes. So first of all, I don't really want to change the host and port, so I'm just going to remove those, but feel free to change the host and port as you see fit. My localhost is also not actually running on localhost 8001. I'm running on port 80. And then one of the things that I need, because of the fact that I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is going to be running my Vite server, but my actual Apache server is running just on my Windows system, is I can't use localhost. It won't actually work. So I need to refer to the IP address that the Windows server, the Windows Subsystem for Linux knows my actual host, my Windows system by. So I'm going to add that in there. Aside from that, this is pretty good. The one thing we need to do is we have a distdir. There was a distdir in that other configuration. I'm just going to put it directly here. This is a regex that is basically saying match anything that doesn't start with the dist file. So anything with the dist file, we don't need to proxy those requests. Anything that's not in our distribution directory there for our front end, so basically our PHP files, but also anything else. You should just be able to browse the web server like normal. If you have files that are outside of this dist directory, you should be able to view those as normal. We just want to send those requests to Apache. So anything that basically doesn't start with PHP React Vite setup / frontend / dist, that is, we want to just send those requests to Apache. So we're going to work as a proxy. Anything that is in this dist folder, this Vite development server can just serve that directly. And now one final thing, because I'm on Windows Subsystem for Linux, is I need to do watch use polling is true. This is just due to a quirk that because these files are actually hosted on my Windows system, but I'm kind of using my node environment in Linux, the file change notifications don't work correctly, so we have to tell it to use polling. If you don't have that set up, don't add this part to your file. It uses additional resources, and if it's working without putting this, you don't want to do that. Okay, so now that we've set that up, there is one final thing that we need to add in here, and that is to add that tag that we saw on the backend integration. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And we can actually just go ahead and add that in right before this tags.js. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that. We'll fix the formatting here just a little bit. And I'm actually going to use PHP to only put this in there if it's debug. Otherwise, we don't actually need this. As you saw, if we're not in debug mode, we don't need this. This is only for doing the hot reloading. We don't actually want this script in there unless we're doing debug. And instead of doing this here, we can use the Vite library that we had to actually get the appropriate URL for the React refresh script there. Okay, so with that done, we should actually be able to use the hot reloading now. So what we want to do is, instead of navigating directly to our Apache server, which won't work, first of all, let's turn debug to true. And you will notice if I just simply do that and I reload my Apache, it's broken. We actually see that there's like a disallowed MIME type of error that's occurring. This is no good, so we don't want any of this. It can't find those files anymore because it's not pointing to those files that we built for production. It's pointing to kind of like the dev version of those files, which the Apache server just doesn't have. So we need to actually access this via the Vite development server. So we're going to go ahead and do npx Vite. And you will notice that it has a URL here. We actually just want to go to the base URL here. Sorry, we actually want to go not to the base because that will redirect us to our XAMPP home, but we want to go to localhost/php React Vite setup. So instead of doing this, we want to do localhost : 5173. And it takes a second to load, but you can see now that we actually have everything working correctly again. So now we're in development and everything is working correctly. And what's really cool here is I'm gonna go ahead and just put this, can we do like that? Thank you. And we can go ahead and use our Visual Studio Code here. And now if I go to the main.jsx, we'll go to app.jsx and save to test HMR and save and watch it change. If we save it, you can see that as soon as I save the file, it actually changes here. We have a counter, it goes up by 1. If I just say go up by 3s and save it, you'll see it starts going up by 3s. So now we have the hot module reloading working. Everything is working exactly as we would expect. So the important thing is just to make sure that we're always accessing this via the Vite development server, which will pull things from Apache as needed. So there you go, guys. That's how you can set up React with the PHP application. Of course, we still have our welcome. It's the date that's coming from PHP, and this is just now a component that is inserted into our PHP page. Everything is working correctly. We have the hot module reloading, which is super cool. So we have a great development experience. And we can add React to our existing PHP app, and there's no need to code your entire app in React or use a single page application architecture. We can keep things simple and add React as we need it on our pages. So it's honestly like a pretty nice setup, but it took me a while to figure out how to do all of these steps and get all of this working correctly, especially with the Windows subsystem for Linux. So I hope those couple of changes there were helpful if you're using that as well. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If it was helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel for more, and I will see you in the next video.